Well, hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another Saving Grace Connect. Super excited about introducing you to maybe a familiar face to many, a good friend of mine, Keith McCracken. Welcome, Keith.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for having me in today.
You are welcome. And so, what we're going to do today is just hear Keith's story of faith, how he became a Christian, all the kind of details, twists, and turns along the way. So let's start at the beginning. Maybe where you're from, tell us about your family, and then we'll get into some specifics.
I grew up in a small town called Tyona in Warren County. It's close to Sheffield. I went to Sheffield High School. And I saw the question earlier, and there was something about describe that place. And I think Jonathan Edwards described it very well when he called that section of Pennsylvania howling wilderness. It's very wild, dark, foreboding, and downright creepy at times, but also very beautiful. So my background was I grew up in the middle of the Allegheny National Forest, surrounded by water everywhere, ponds, streams, rivers, whatever.
And so what's like culturally, what's that like?
I have likened it to, I've told people that when you grow up in that area, you're kind of separatist. I don't know any other way to word it. Great people, nice people, but the best comparison I can make is like squirrels. This is my tree. These are my acorns, okay? It's all cool. We can meet on the ground, but don't come near my tree. And then I moved to Indiana, and it's like gophers. One pops their head up, and the whole community is up looking around.
Yeah.
That's not Warren. That's not the way I grew up.
Yes. Yeah, and so that I'm sure that has maybe even church implications.
Yes, I think so too.
And we'll get there in a bit. But tell us about your family too.
I am the fourth of six children. I am the third of three boys, if that makes sense. So I was in the middle, and we call it two families. The older three were less than 2 years apart, and then there was 4 years. Then there was me, and then I have a sister who's 11 months younger than me. We call them Irish twins.
Okay, yeah.
And then there's a sister 13 months younger than her. The three older ones went to Warren High School. The three younger ones went to Sheffield High School.
So it really was like two different experiences.
Lived in the same house.
Yeah.
So it was two very different experiences. I moved out of a big school, graduating around 400 around that time, and down to a small school where my class was the second largest ever at 122 students, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. And you're married?
Yes, for a long time. In fact, in June, it will be 30 years.
To Melissa?
To Melissa
and
McCracken.
Tell us about your kids.
Yeah, my wife, Melissa Larmy McCracken, that's Army with an L, is also from Warren, but grew up in a variety of places before that because her father was Forest Service. We have 7 children. The oldest, Levi, is a math teacher at Homer Center High School. Judah just got out of 5 years in the U.S. Army as an engineer and is living at home right now and looking at jobs. And if you're watching this, Judah, you have an interview tomorrow. But anyway, and then moving down, we'd have Hannah, who just graduated from IUP in nutrition and will be starting her master's degree in nutrition at Seton Hill. Then we moved down to Michael, local sports star, played in the Homer Center State Championship game, currently living in New Jersey. Moved down past him, and we have Eden, who's about to start a bakery right here in Indiana,
awesome. Yep.
in the old pizza house. So a very ambitious young lady. So she'll be doing that. Another one down is Selah, and she is working at TJ Maxx. If you're in there, you've probably run into her, and saving up a lot of money and has a security certificate of some kind, armed security, and is also looking into EMT.
Oh, wow.
So she's going to start the IUP classes to be an emergency medical technician.
Oh, that's great.
And finally, Isaiah is 13 years old, an 8th grader at Homer Center High School.
So that makes you tired just thinking about all those different plates that are spinning.
Yeah.
So backtracking a bit, tell us about your mom and dad. So you grew up in a Christian home?
Yeah, I grew up in a Baptist home that was Christian. And I do mean to say it in that order. My father was an amazing guy, very mechanically inclined guy. I mean, for us, entertainment was whatever Dad was doing in the garage. We just wanted to be a part of it. Really neat. We can get into some other aspects of him later that have really stuck with me well as a Christian and suited me well. Mom, very intelligent lady, very skitterish, suspected everybody. Everybody was a suspect.
Okay.
And always watching, very astute with people. Just studied people constantly.
Yeah.
And as you well know, I've picked up a lot of that too.
You're really a combination of both of them
Yeah.
in many ways.
Yeah, I really am.
Yeah.
The older I get, the more I realize that.
And your dad kind of instilled in you a love for hymns as well, right?
Oh my goodness, yeah, and that's the other thing. My parents, my dad loved to sing. It didn't matter what it was, but that didn't necessarily make him a great singer. He would be what I would call average tonal quality,
Okay.
you know. But man, when he sang, he just loved it. His whole body was into it.
Uh,
Mom, on the other hand, was absolutely phenomenal. Her voice quality, tone, pitch, right on, dead on. But you could stand beside her in church and you might hear her.
okay.
And just very reserved,
Yeah.
you know, that type of thing. I had two sisters, the younger sisters. One has perfect pitch, and the other one would not need a microphone to entertain a crowd of 500.
Okay.
Her voice is that powerful.
Wow.
So, yeah.
And you sing as well.
I sing now, but I didn't growing up.
Okay.
My sisters intimidated me into, like, they were so good that I just thought,
Just let them go.
just let that go. I'm not getting in
Yeah.
on that. We get in the car and turn the radio on. My dad would turn the radio on, and my sisters would just start singing. And I think it was like 6 or 7 years old. They were working out harmonies with Mom's help,
Yeah. Okay.
and they could harmonize like
So they have real talent.
oh,
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
both incredible. Yeah.
So you grew up in a Baptist Christian home. When did faith become real to you?
At around 7 years old, I remember an evangelist, and another strange thing about me is I've got this thing for names. So I remember his name. It was Jake Boggs. He was a Baptist evangelist who came to our church, and it was the first hellfire and brimstone sermon I had ever heard.
Okay.
And at 7 years old, very impressionable and living out in the woods and not getting a lot of social contact, that hit me hard. And I remember him standing at the pulpit, and he was saying, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock." And he was knocking on the pulpit. And I'm telling you, every time he hit that pulpit, my heart went boom.
Oh, wow. It went right through
And
you.
I was like, something's happening to me. I don't understand. It's got to be the Lord. And I believe it was.
Mm-hmm.
And so I believe the Lord called me at 7 years old, and I got baptized in the church. And then I just grew up in the church. I don't know any other way to put it. I was baptized. I was getting really good Bible teaching. The Baptists, I got to give them this. They got good teaching, and it's Bible-based. They don't get off it that much.
Sure.
In fact, they might fall, and the segment I was part of was cessationist.
Mm-hmm.
So they would be, again, like Mom, very, very careful.
Yeah.
And
there can be a wide swath of Baptist churches.
yeah,
too.
we were American Baptists,
Okay.
to make it even clearer for those who know they're Baptist.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we didn't believe in drums.
Mm-hmm.
You know, no drums. That was of the devil.
Yeah.
But singing was great, and no guitars, just a huge, massive pipe organ that was really cool.
Oh, okay.
So
we'll get there, but you play
Yeah.
the bass. So at some point you went off the
off
musical ranch.
Yeah, an escape from that wilderness. The only thing we had was the radio, or if we went out and bought records.
Mm-hmm.
So as I said, I had older siblings. So although I'm a child of the 70s, I got a lot of 60s music, Humble
Okay.
Pie, Cream.
Because of the older siblings.
Yeah, I would be listening to theirs, Led
Yeah.
Zeppelin.
Yeah.
But that was all theirs,
Mhm.
if you know what I mean. But it was an escape.
Yeah.
I just sit back, listen to that music, and take it in. And then I started to discover, as I got older, in high school, I discovered, I'll call it angry music, Judas
Mhm.
Priest, those types of
Yeah.
things, Ozzy,
Yeah.
and just stuff that would make me angry before a wrestling match, because it actually worked.
Yeah. Yeah. So you made a profession of faith at 7,
Mhm.
saved at 7, teenage years and a little bit older. Would you say you're actively walking with the Lord at those times? You're confused?
No. That's a firm no. I wasn't. I thought I was, because there were a lot of people around me who modeled excellent morality
Mhm.
and excellence in their lives. I'm not going to name names, but
Sure.
they were just people I looked up to who were the epitome of morality. They dressed right, they walked right, they talked right. I wanted to be like them.
Yeah.
And so they didn't necessarily exude the Lord, although I'm sure some of them were Christians. What I saw was their self-confidence,
Yeah.
their sort of polished humanity, for lack of a better term.
And so for you, that fed humanism, right?
Absolutely. I would call myself, in retrospect, a humanist at that point.
So give a definition for those who might not be familiar.
Well, I'm a Randian humanist. In other words, Ayn Rand and the philosophy of objectivism. I had started listening to a band called Rush, and they're a phenomenal band, but most of their lyrics at the time were inspired by Ayn Rand. She wrote a book called The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged, and it was all about the perfection of man. How good can man be without a God? And if you know Rand, she was an enemy, so to speak, of C.S. Lewis. They argued back and forth constantly. And I didn't think about it. I just thought that, okay, if Rush is saying this and they're so cool, that this is the way it's got to be.
So that combination really resonated with you at the time.
It did. It did, because I wanted to be a great human. I really did.
Yeah.
I thought I knew what Christ was, but I had sort of shoved him out. As my ego got bigger and my confidence in the fact that I was becoming a better human, I just sort of, and Jesus too.
Yeah. Okay.
For lack of a better
So
way.
pride is growing in
absolutely.
those years. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And you still going to church?
Sort of. I would go to make my parents happy.
Okay.
But by then, we had switched several pastors, and I even at one point, I didn't plan on telling this story today, but there was a pastor who came out to see me because I had stopped going. He had an issue with his leg. I don't know how to describe it, but the one leg kind of went in at an angle and back, and he was born that way, and he was a great man. So Paul Fitzgerald, if you're listening, somehow, I'm sorry. And what I mean by that is he came out to talk to me, and I was really rude.
He came out as a pastor,
He
kind
came
of
out as a
pursuing
pastor
somebody
and
that he
said-
felt might be struggling.
Yes.
Yeah.
And said, I haven't seen you in church. I'm concerned about you, And I just said, why don't you just leave? I know my mother sent you, so just either leave or pick up a shovel.
Yeah.
I was rude to him. I was
Yeah.
really mean, and he stuck it out longer than he should have. He really did.
Yeah.
And then he sort of left, and
Yeah.
I was happy that he left at the time. But I am sorry, Paul.
So how
I
old were
really
you at that time? Like when
I was 20.
20.
20,
Okay.
21, somewhere.
So
around.
how many years kept going till things changed with you and the Lord?
Things changed with me and the Lord because of, for a lot of people, it was a girlfriend, okay? And it was a bad relationship. And I know this is going to sound crazy, but the relationship ended because I didn't sleep with her. And so that really...
But that fits the moral
yes,
kind
the moral, right, exactly. And so I began to get angry, and I turned back to, and Jesus too, and brought him out so I could yell at him and say, listen, I have been morally, on cue. I mean,
I've
on
done
point.
everything you want me to do.
Yeah, I checked the boxes,
Yeah.
and I want to remind you, God, I checked the box, and I don't have the beautiful wife. I'm still working in the back room of a machine shop, sawing parts for somebody else to machine.
Yeah.
I'm not getting all of the glorious things that someone who follows you, this is my mind, I'm not, but I thought I was.
Yeah. So you had a really workspace system in your mind.
Very works-based.
Yeah.
Very
I do good
works-based.
things, I should get good things.
Right, and I wasn't getting them. So I started to get angry, and I took that out on some people, and I don't know their names, but I'm sorry.
This whole thing is not to be an apology to everybody.
No, and that'll stop soon.
Yeah.
And so I started doing something to just get my mind off it. And I had a very good high school wrestling career. So I started coaching. And I coached at 3 different high schools off and on, landed back at the big one at Warren, and worked with some kids who were going to a Nazarene church. And they kept inviting me. And by then I was like, I believe in God, but I don't believe in church. Okay? I mean, we hear that constantly,
Sure.
right? So I was just doing my thing, and they'd invite me to volleyball, and it was great. And we'd play volleyball, have a 2-minute little sermon, and then they'd go over to the church, just adjacent, and sit down for what they called worship and witness night. And they'd pass the microphone around, and all the old ladies would get up and say, "Oh, my son finally came back to the Lord after 40 years,"
Yeah.
And I would sit there going, yeah,
Because you were a
all right.
skeptic too.
Yeah, I was like, all right, they do this. This lady says the same thing every week. I mean, I was real
Right.
critical.
Sure.
And I started working with this one kid who just kept me coming. I really liked him, and he was a good wrestler. And so I just kept coming, and I didn't want to admit it, but I started to really like the worship and witness. I still had my face on, my attitude,
Sure. But something was drawing you.
but something was drawing me
Yeah.
to, wait a minute, God is doing things for these people, but it's not that he didn't give them a Benz,
Mm-hmm.
or like bring their husband back,
Right.
but he's doing, and they love him for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to hear this,
Yeah.
and started working on me. So one night, and this is part of my testimony too, I came in, I played volleyball. I wanted to go over to worship and witness. I walk over, there's a missionary. Now, I grew up Baptist. I'd heard every missionary story there
Sure.
was. And my heart attitude was, all right, if this lady starts talking about muddy rivers and naked kids and show slides, and I'm going to get up and walk out.
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
I've seen it before. Maybe I'll throw a buck in the plate on the way by, because that's all
Right.
they want,
Yeah.
But she gave a very simple altar call. She said that she felt like there was someone who was very rebellious. Well, no kidding. There's a guy in combat boots and tight muscle shirt who'd been
Don't
lifting.
have to be a prophet, right?
Yeah, no. I mean, and so she talked, and I just felt the Lord overwhelm me. There's no
Yeah.
other word for it. And I tell people it was literally an out-of-body experience, because as she's talking, she's doing an altar call, and I'm getting up out of my seat going, what are you doing? Sit
Okay.
down.
Yeah.
But I'm like, no, I can't. I got to go.
Yeah.
I got to go down with all these hypocrites,
Yeah.
and do the thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I walked to the front of the church. I knelt at the altar, and I'll never forget it. She came over. She was praying for everybody. She stopped at me, and she said, are you ready to give everything that you have and that you are to the Lord Jesus Christ? And I looked up at her, and as honestly as I could, I looked at her and I said, I don't know. I have
Yeah.
no idea why I'm here,
Yeah.
but I want to.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, God's going to honor that.
Yeah.
She said, just you wait. God's going to honor that. And then she prayed for me, and she moved on down the line.
Okay.
And I thought, great, I just joined the ranks of all these hypocrites.
Yeah.
But the next day, things changed. I went into work, and there was a truck driver, one of my favorite guys, who we used to have swearing battles. We used to,
Okay.
who was the most vulgar
Yeah.
to the other guy, and then we'd laugh and give up after
Yeah.
a while. And I'm doing my thing, and Howard comes in, and he starts, and I said, hi, Howard. I just didn't want to, didn't have
Yeah.
a desire. And I'm like,
So something was changing.
yeah, what is the
internally.
matter with me?
Yeah.
And so then that Bible that I grew up with and had, that they gave me in the Baptist church at 7,
Mm-hmm.
I went home and I opened it, and I said, what is happening to me?
Yeah.
And so I just started reading it, and all these things that I'd read a million times were like the first time I'd ever read them.
Yeah. It was all starting to click.
Yeah, and retrospectively, the Holy Spirit just opened my eyes
Yeah.
to the Word of God, and I just started sucking it in.
Yeah.
And then volleyball and worship and witness nights got a lot different.
I bet.
Yeah.
And how old were you roughly about
Right
that
around
time?
24, 25.
Okay.
Right around
Yeah.
that
Still
age.
single at that point.
Still single. I had dated, at that point, the story gets really funny, because I told everybody, okay, I'm a Christian now. Who's the most Christian girl in town? Because that's who I'm going after, And they named a name.
Yeah, okay.
It was not my wife. Okay.
Yeah.
And I pursued this young lady. It was a fun relationship, but it just wasn't right.
Wasn't the one, right?
But that caused other people to say, no, not him and her. No.
Yeah.
And so they started asking me questions. And so I was able to say, listen, guys, I can't explain it to you, but this happened to me, and I'm different, and
Yeah.
I know it, and I need to act on that, and I want to encourage you to pursue the same things.
Tell the story about when you went to band practice and you had a whole plan to share the gospel.
Well, I got to back up a little bit. In high school, my high school best friend, who is now my brother-in-law, he married my sister.
Oh, that's cool.
And he is a phenomenal musician to this day. And he formed a band. And the band was practicing, and he was my best friend, so I was there. But I had been basically asked to not return to, playing the clarinet and stuff. And when I was younger, I just couldn't get it. I had no musical ability.
Okay. Yeah.
But I loved music. It's kind of like Dad.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I couldn't stay away from it. So they had a band. They were meeting. They were playing, and the bass player quit. And so my brother-in-law, to-be,
Sure.
said, hey, pick that thing up. I'm going to show you what to do. And I was like, okay. And so I picked up the bass and just started playing single notes at a time. He said, "Now put your finger hard on that first dot. It's 3 up from the."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Okay, hey, that's cool." And we started going, and that's how it started. And he taught me scales. I know people are supposed to learn chords, but when I play bass, it's all based on scales. Anyway, we did that for a little bit and kind of laid it down. And then after I got saved, some guys who had heard me play before around and heard me sing, because it's kind of a pretty decently kept secret, but I do have a pretty good voice.
And your voice matched the times perfectly.
Absolutely. Yeah, Sammy Hagar.
Describe that a little bit.
Yeah, well, Sammy Hagar was another idol that I found that I could sound like, that. So if you know Sammy, that's a pretty heavy order.
Yeah.
And I could not do Rush. I couldn't do Geddy Lee. That was just too weird. But I wanted to play like him. So the bass inspirations came from those kind of guys, and the singing inspiration came from bands like Triumph, bands like Judas Priest, bands like Sammy Hagar, those kind of things. So I have a very high voice, and some guys like that. That's what they wanted to do. We were by then into the mid '80s, and it was going like punk, but there was still a backlash to the punk that was heavy.
Sure.
So I wanted to be part of the backlash.
Yeah.
Before I got saved. After I got saved, I didn't care about it. But some guys invited me. It was in a beauty shop in Youngsville, PA. And they said, "Come on out and jam with us." And this kid's mom she pushed everything back. We come in, we jammed. We had a great time. And I'm thinking to myself, and by then I'd been a Christian about 6 months. Hey, this kid, he's a really great kid. He would make a great Christian. Again, humanist thinking,
Still
invading,
in there,
right,
yeah.
right, because he's a great person. So we had him. We'll just call him Joe,
Okay.
right?
Sure.
And another kid named Jim. And so we're jamming out, and I'm watching Joe, and he's really excited. And Jim's just a hippie. I didn't even know if he had eyes. The hair
You
down.
couldn't see anything.
Yeah, I couldn't see anything. Had a big what they call Jackson Charvel, which was the big guitar of the time. And we play for a while, and then Joe was like, "Hey, let's form a band. Let's do it. I got a name, and we'll do." And I said, "Hold up, Joe. I just want to jam with you." And he said, "Well, why won't you want to go out?" And I said, "Well, Joe, something happened to me. Let me explain." I said, "I met Jesus, and my priorities have really changed. I love hanging out with you guys, and I'd like to do that more, but I'm just not into a band." Joe got mad. Joe,
The guy you thought would be a great Christian. Yeah.
Joe's storming out, and I'm going, "What is going on?" And I'm watching Joe go, and I'm saying, "Joe, I'm sorry." I'm like, hey, wait, And I watch him go out the door, and all of a sudden I hear behind me, he's like, "Hey, man, you tell me about this Jesus." And I turn around, here's this guy, this like druggy hippie guy, and he's like asking me about Jesus, and I'm like, "No, not you. No. And so I'm like, "Well, what do you want to know?" And he said, "Well, what did he do to you?" And I was like, "Well,
Yeah.
And then I left. Well, 3 weeks later, that young man became a Christian.
Wow.
Started leading a worship band.
Okay.
Got married.
Yeah.
It's an awesome story.
Yeah.
It was the most awful witness that I could have been. I was terrible. I was annoyed.
Yeah.
Like-
Kind of sounds like Jonah a little bit.
Yeah, there are some
Slightly.
similarities, yeah. So then I just picked the bass up every now and then after I sort of messed around with a Christian band from southern New York,
Okay.
and they wanted to go big, and I just wanted to do worship.
Okay.
I wouldn't have called it that at the time, because what we now know as worship hadn't developed yet into what it is, because worship was still an organ,
Okay.
or a piano, or
Yeah,
maybe
so
one.
like it was just starting probably.
Right, but we weren't rocking. We
Yeah.
weren't rocking worship, and was my vision back then.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So then, how many years elapsed till you met Melissa, or maybe you already knew her at this time?
I knew her at this time. We had met through friends of mine, family that I went to the church with, that grew up in the Baptist church with. He was dating her friend, and so he wanted me to take him to Kinzu Beach to meet this girl, and so I wasn't doing a whole lot. And this was before I was a Christian, and I did. I took him out, and then I saw Melissa, and I like to say that it's the classic. I saw her standing there, the song,
Yeah.
and I was very taken, very smitten.
Yeah.
And I was trying to do everything I could to impress her. At that time, I actually was pretty well built, and could do some like acrobatic things and catching grapes in my mouth that she was throwing. Whatever, stupid things guys do to impress
Sure.
girls that really
Yeah.
don't work.
Yeah.
So she played along, but she was quite annoyed and
Not impressed.
not impressed at
Yeah.
all. No, and knew me from other circumstances.
Mhm.
In fact, one of them was really cool. I went to a volleyball game of hers, and later on, after I met her the first time, I went to a volleyball game. Still wanted to impress her, so the two girls that were supposed to do the national anthem chickened out.
Mhm.
And so they turned around and said, anybody, and I just stood right up and walked down and just boomed the national anthem in
Yeah.
Warren High School. And people went nuts. They loved it. And she was just like
Arrogant.
shaking her
Young
head,
punk.
arrogant punk, you know. So anything I could, but then I just sort of let it go. I mean, after I became a Christian, I just didn't think about her. Well, she saw me with the Christian girl one night and said, like everybody did, wait, this doesn't,
Doesn't matter.
2 and 2 don't make 9. You know, I don't know what's going on. So she asked me about it. And actually, I have to back up. I was on my way to a hearing. I had assaulted a person at work, for
Okay.
lack of a better
Yeah.
term.
Because you were a fighter.
I was a fighter, angry
Yeah.
guy, and I was dismissed from my employment.
Okay.
And so I was on my way to a hearing.
Now that you're walking with the Lord, but this is past stuff.
Right.
that-
And her
came
dad,
through.
yeah, I was going past her dad's office, and she happened to be there because she needed a ride home.
Mhm.
And so, and this is the way the Lord works. I'm walking, she comes out of a door, she looks at me, she stops. And she just blurted it out. And if you know my wife, this is the way she is. She's like, what happened to you? And I said, what do you mean? She says, you're not the same person I met on the beach. What happened to you?
Yeah.
And I thought, what an opportunity. And I said, all right, I don't have time to tell you right now. Give me your phone number. I'll call you and we'll talk about it.
Uh-huh.
That started a relationship of me discipling Melissa, who was a Catholic and,
Yeah.
and what I call an uber Catholic.
Mhm.
In other words, she really walked out what she was taught
Sure.
and was a good Catholic. But now I was really introducing her to the Bible and some of the things in it, you know, going through Samuel and going through a lot.
Mhm.
And it started as a discipleship. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to tell you I wasn't distracted by
Sure.
her
Right.
and had other intentions, but you know, the Lord really honored that, and we grew closer together. And then we committed dating suicide because I'm older,
Uh-huh.
and she began to go to IUP. So I stayed home and worked in a factory for 4 years while she went to college,
IUP, yeah.
and we stayed together.
Okay.
So
And then you got married after not long after she graduated?
yeah,
Yeah.
very shortly, 1 week after her only sibling, a brother.
Okay.
So we were married like one
Oh, wow.
week
Okay.
after
Yeah.
him. So
Yeah. So her faith became real as you.
oh,
started
absolutely.
spending time
And I just want to say this, you know, it was always funny because if there's one group that the Baptists were always very skeptical of, it was the Catholics.
Mhm.
So this was a real kind of Romeo Juliet kind of
Yeah.
thing because I went Baptist to Nazarene, you know,
Yeah.
and then started dating a Catholic. And it confused a lot of the Christians who knew what was going on. They're like,
Sure.
what
Sure.
are you thinking? What are you doing? You know? But the Lord knew what he was doing. I didn't, honestly, I just was doing.
And so now, how many years have you been married now, like present day?
In June, it will be 30 years. So 29
Okay.
and 11/12 or something like
Yeah.
that.
Wow. That's a big anniversary. Congratulations.
thank
That's
you.
awesome. So I met you guys probably, let's see, 24 years ago or so.
Yeah.
So you were on the first leg of marriage, maybe 6 years, 7 years in.
Yeah, no kids yet. Well, by the
Little-
time you one.
Yeah, maybe one. So life is challenging, lots of twists and turns. How as you guys have grown in the Lord, what are things you've learned about the Lord, about yourselves, the messiness of church life, all that kind of stuff?
Well, number one, the Lord has changed both of us, and I'll speak primarily for me because I'm the one here. I don't think my wife has changed that much. She's just gotten even more gracious.
Uh-huh.
You know, there's just no question. She's gotten more gracious, more loving, and those types of things. Because even though I was a Christian, I'm an intense person, and she had to live with that. And I've become a much less intense person. And I'm very grateful to God that the one thing I can say without hesitation. He has humbled me many, many, many times, and I'm grateful for it. And I can look back, and as I've said so many times, sometimes you want to say, well, I'm a little more chill because I'm older.
Mm-hmm.
I disagree. I'm more chill, quote unquote, because I've allowed the Lord and His Word to change me, to make me a better vessel for what He would want me to
Right.
do.
Yeah, and we were talking the other day. There are guys a lot older than Keith that are as angry as a hornet.
Yeah,
To this day. So age does not necessarily mellow anybody or refine.
No.
It can actually embitter.
Yeah, it can make it worse. And I firmly believe that if I'd gone on without the Lord, I don't know. I don't want to think about where I'd be.
Right. But if you follow the trajectory of humanism and the pride
Yes.
and the anger that came with that.
Yeah, humanism, there's a cliff waiting at the end of humanism. I mean, it's a big one.
Yeah.
Because that's where it will take you. It's just no question.
Yeah, and how, I should have asked this a long time ago, but
Sure.
how does the gospel blow up humanism?
Because it absolutely, positively is not about morality. It is not about me becoming the best guy I can be, be your best self, whatever all this stuff is. You realize that, especially when you've tried to do that, some people want to but don't even try. And I tried. And it just makes you angry. A failure makes you angry, makes you more calculating in what you will and won't do because you don't want to fail. And so the gospel blows that up in that Jesus is calling us to crucify ourselves, and, our flesh. And so somebody perfecting their flesh doesn't want to crucify it.
Right. They want to preserve it, right?
They want to preserve it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's been the primary thing, is that the older I get and the more we go through, and we've been through a lot as a couple, as parents, as a church, we've been through a lot. And the more that we go through that, the more I just feel the hand of the Lord saying, you're mine. This is mine. Move where I tell you to go.
Yeah.
And I don't argue with them.
Yeah. Yeah, and then what's really cool is like even some of your dad's favorite hymns, they're filled with gospel truth.
Yes.
You just couldn't hear it at one time.
No, I my wife laughs because we both know when it's a Baptist tune because I know all the words and I don't even think about it.
Yeah.
Okay. And please don't watch for this, folks, but there are certain hymns that we'll do on Sunday. I might make it 3 words and I'll just start crying. I'm going to go Kay McCoy on you here. Because I can still hear Dad. I can hear his echo because what he sang with that passion in church, even though it wasn't the best tonal qualities,
Yes.
there was a passion behind it. He really meant it. He really felt it.
Faith, right?
Yes. And I didn't get it. I'd just look at him and go, is he for real?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
He was for real. And so I have the blessing of still hearing the echo of my father, not in some ghost way.
Right. But in a memory way.
I can hear him singing.
Yeah.
And what a blessing. I hope that a lot of kids in this church grow up with that anyway, that someday when they sing a song, they'll hear their dad like I do.
Yeah.
It is a tremendous blessing to know that my father was a man of God, in a sense that he was flawed. He knew his flaws, and but yet he would do things like Saturday morning. I'd see him sitting at his desk, and like I told you this the other day.
Yeah, tell them, because this is a really cool thing.
I said, Dad, what are you doing? He said, well, I'm writing the checks. And I said, what are you writing checks for? And he said, well, I got to pay the electric. I got to pay the water. I got to pay the TV. I got to pay the natural gas company. And he said, then you want to come to the post office with me when I'm done? It was a mile away, and we would ride our bicycles. Dad was a big bicycle rider.
Yeah.
And so we'd go to the post office, and he'd stop, and he'd put them in one at a time, and then he'd close his eyes. He'd put them in one at a time, close his eyes. But I'm like, Dad, what are you doing? And he said, well, when I put this in the mail, he said, I say a little prayer and say, Lord, please bless the people who work for American Water. Okay, Lord, this check of mine is going to be used for some family here in the area to
Yeah.
and it's someone's salary. And so, Lord, bless this check. And the first thing he would do is write the tithe check, and he taught me that very well. Off the top, tithe, period. First Baptist Church, Warren, PA. Write it right out.
Yeah.
And then he'd set that one aside. Then he'd start paying the other bills.
Yeah.
And until we got into the electronic age, the ease of the electronic age,
Sure.
I literally would take our bills into the Indiana post office, stand at the mail slot, and go, Lord,
Oh, that's
would you
awesome.
bless the families that are represented by this check?
Yeah.
Would you bring them to you? Would you, whatever it is. And so those little pieces of Dad that I picked up,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to let them go.
Yeah. And so moms and dads, grandmas and grandpas watching, your example is powerful.
Yes, it is.
Even with hardened, arrogant teenagers who
Mm-hmm.
will grow up to be soft and humble followers of Christ.
Absolutely. They're watching what you're doing. And that's not to put a shame on you.
But on the
It's
encouraging side.
On the encouraging
yeah.
side, your kids see what you do and what you believe.
Mm-hmm.
And I understood that my father was imperfect. But I also understood that he loved God. And that made it easier for me when I, thinking I was perfect,
Mm-hmm.
needed God.
Yeah.
It made it easier to be imperfect.
Yeah. Yeah, and there was grace, and that's
There's a lot of grace,
Your dad
yeah.
had experienced grace
Mm-hmm.
and modeled it for you as well.
Yeah, he even, Warren County's a county school system. So he would get up, he worked third shift at GTE Sylvania, which was a manufacturer. And then he would leave at 7 o'clock. He would drive around in Warren County picking up students who had special needs. And I remember he would carry them some of them into the building. They were that severe. And he would make us go on that run with them. I mean, and you can go ahead and make jokes about the little special bus all you want. It meant something different to me. And he would say, I was like, Dad, why are you doing this? And he would say, well, the money's not bad, but I had 6 healthy, normal kids that didn't have these kind of problems. And this is my way of blessing people who didn't have that.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
he would make us ride. And when you're a teenager, that is like, do not put me in this. Everybody knows what this bus is,
Yeah,
Dad. What are you
right.
doing to me?
Yeah. He was
Well,
teaching. Yeah.
He was like, well, what you think I'm doing is not what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I'm showing you compassion.
Yeah.
I'm showing you that
That's
I'm going to
awesome.
carry Stacy from the bus into her house.
Yeah.
Put her in her wheelchair. So her mom, so
What a picture of
Yeah.
Christ. Yeah.
so.
Well, why don't we end with this, Keith? This ended different than I was expecting. Why don't you pray for all the parents and grandparents watching?
Yeah, I can do that. Lord, thank you for parents and grandparents. And Lord, thank you for families. Thank you that you bless through generations, Lord. And I ask that you would just make every generation represented by those who are hearing this aware of your presence and your desire to have them walk with you. Lord, bless the grandparents with, if they can't sing, just help them sing loud. Lord, bless the children with ears to really look around, to really understand the passions of their parents and grandparents who are walking with the Lord. Please, Lord, bless the families of every church in Indiana, not just ours. Lord, I know you've abundantly blessed ours. Lord, please bless the families who are in the churches generationally throughout Indiana County. Thank you, Jesus. In your name, amen.
Amen. Thank you all for watching. Thank you, Keith.
You're welcome, Joe.